All right, we're on the multiplication tab. You'll notice that I've made a couple of modifications here, particularly down in this area, because I made some errors and corrected them. All right, but going into it, let's look at what we want to find out. The big question is, what is the probability of going to town C and having it rain? Well, there's three different approaches. One, we can create a tree based on the information. We can make a contingency table, or we can use Bayes' theorem to solve that problem. Let's start off with the tree first because it's very convenient visual as to what's going on. So we want to find the joint probability, which is the probability of A and B happening. Since it says and, it's going to be a multiplication rule. So I'm going to zoom in here. Hit it nice and centered. And so the joint probability is going to be this, Shift 8 to get that time symbol, the probability of it raining. And we continue on the way down. Now I can see why this is somewhat redundant. You have to do this over and over again. So if there is a time limit, this might not be the best approach. However, it will give you just about all the information that you will need. Okay, so that's the joint probability. So we know the probability of any one of these events happening. But before we go on, let's make sure we can check our let's make sure we're doing it correctly and check our work. Good, it equals 1, which is exactly how it should be. These three should equal 1, these two should equal 1, these two should equal 1, these two should equal 1. So everything looks good. All right, so we found our joint probability. Now we can either do the same thing or we can fill it in based on this event. So we are looking at it based on rain. So town A, if it rains, is 0.12. 0.12. If it rains for town B, 0.09. And then 0.4 times 0.5, 0.2. And then we're going to sum it. And I'm just going to use the AutoSum function up here. It automatically does it. So 0.41. Okay, so what we're looking for with this posterior probability is the likelihood or the probability of an event happening based on previous things. So in this case, it's going to be this event divided by the sum of those events. This event divided by here, this event divided by here. So equal sign this divided by this number, and I'm going to push F4. The little dollar signs means this cell is not going to be moving anywhere. And then I just simply scroll it on down. Which means, going back to our question, what is the probability of going to town C and having it rain? Well, 48%. Now, let's look at it from the perspective of Bayes' theorem. And as you can see, I've already made some of the numbers available in the data set. So probability of A times probability or conditional probability of that event happening. First set of probabilities, second set of probabilities. So basically you can choose a 1 or a 2 and divide by the rest. Very similar to what we just did here. We took the joint probability and looked at the sum or the average of it, because that's really what's going on with this Bayes' theorem. You're taking the average or the sum of all of them down here, all these joint probabilities, and then what's the probability of one happening within all of them. So the equation, while nasty looking, is actually fairly simple. You just have to be very careful about how you input it into Excel, because you are going to have a lot of parentheses, a lot of pluses and timesing and a divide in there. So make sure you do it correctly. So let me zoom in here nice and tight so we can see clearly. And start off with an equal sign. Then start off again with a parenthesis. And we're going to be doing this first little bit here. So we want to know what is the probability of town C and raining. So the first one is this first probability times the conditional probability, 0.5. That's this first term here. Then I'm going to push divide. Add another set of parentheses, but this time I'm going to add 2 parentheses. One for this entire area, or this entire set of functions, and then the second one for each individual together. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this times this one times this one, and then this one times this one, and adding them all together. So the first one is this, or A1, times B1 A1. Here, I close my parenthesis, put in my plus sign, put in my parenthesis. Now I'm going to be looking at the B group. So town B, or A2, times probability of B1 A2 plus parenthesis. Now it's back to our C group, and you have to include this with this bottom set of numbers. Even though we have it up here, it needs to be repeated or else you're going to get a wrong answer. It's going to be this guy times the bottom one, parenthesis. And you notice that we're all in green here. We need to have a black one at the end. So it's basically saying we're going to take these 2 times together, put in parenthesis, divide by this times this times this one times this one. We add them all together, and then this whole term divided by this whole term. So you have to be very careful about these parentheses. Otherwise, you're probably going to get the wrong answer, because Excel will only calculate or compute based on what you enter into it. So it should look something like that. And we get an answer of 0.4878049, which, long and behold, is exactly what we have up above. So that is Bayes' theorem.